Today we are here to honor Walter Anderson, offering an alumni award made in his name. For those who attended Antioch before the fall of 1946 or after 1965, you may not know who Walter, or Andy, as students and colleagues called him, was. A more gifted, charismatic, and memorable human being I have never met. It has been a true joy to research and write his biography, and then to go to significant places where he lived or worked over his 88 years.
What made him memorable? What made him a standout professor on campus? You didn't have to be a music major to know who he was and to enjoy the fruits of at least some of his exploits. To begin with, who would ever have guessed that a premature baby with a head small enough to fit into a teacup would eventually be over 6 feet tall and would be a musical prodigy? He was born and raised in Zanesville, Ohio, and had 8 brothers and sisters. His grandparents were slaves, and his father a supervisor in a glass-blowing factory. His mother was a teacher. He and his siblings all took piano lessons. He was playing and getting paid for it from the age of 8 onward, for car shows, as an octet accompanist, for political rallies, and whichever party he was playing for was the one that won that part of the election, and for a dance band. In 7th grade, while taking organ lessons, he became a church organist. This young man eventually ended up mingling with the greats in the music world as head of the music department at the National Endowment for the Arts for 15 years. In that capacity, he planned and coordinated 134 concerts for President Carter's 4-day inaugural week. Think of that, 134 concerts. History was made when he was hired by Antioch in 1946 as the first black head of a department in a non-black institution of higher learning, something so noteworthy that it was written up in the New York Times. What Andy accomplished in building up the music department from a budget that only covered his salary when he arrived, to the highly respected department with a number of music faculty, a string quartet in residence, and a number of music majors, was incredible. Many of those music majors have gone on to great accomplishments of their own in the music world. You would have reason enough to be mightily impressed by him if you had heard him play the piano or organ on campus, either in concert in Kelly Hall or in an impromptu jazz session in the C Shop after hours. And while carrying a full teaching load, he prepared and passed a rigorous exam to be admitted as a fellow to the American Guild of Organists. He was one of only 5 in the nation to do so that year. Typical of his concern for others was deciding the day of the exam that he couldn't in good conscience tie up a handful of out-of-state examiners for the usual 2 days of testing. Instead, he met the stringent requirements in one 14-hour marathon. Beside that, he had an insatiable appetite for new challenges. He chipped rock from the quarry in the Glen, carrying it home a few rocks at a time over the course of 6 months. Eventually, he built a barbecue that was of such size and beauty as to inspire a few Antioch couples to actually be married in front of it. He learned to weave, then challenged his wife, Dorothy, to learn to reupholster their living room couch with the 44 yards he had created. He was a chef who loved to cook almost as much as he loved to make music, and would womp up quantities of pies or whole wheat donuts for a bakery he started in Yellow Springs. He also created bourbon balls, a confection he was going to market to various department stores all over the Midwest, until the operation was shut down almost at its inception because the alcoholic content was too high to go through the mails. We're going, I hope, to enjoy some of those bourbon balls today, the recipe being included in the back of the biography I wrote about him. He and his wife integrated the local Westminster Presbyterian Church when they joined the all-white congregation in the fall of 1947. He went on to become an elder in the church and retained membership even after he moved to Washington, D.C. in 1968, serving as organist for a while, creating some memorable Christmas programs and a unique pantomime for Holy Week that was set up as a treasure hunt throughout the church. His wife and 2 children, Sandra and David, and Sandra is here with us today on the front row. Sandra and David and their mother lived with him for 15 years in Yellow Springs before Dorothy left him to return to her family home in Cleveland, taking their children with her. A devastated Andy was left behind to pick up the pieces. Helping him were some devoted friends like Erwin Abrams, Charlotte Drake, and Mary Porter Cook. Son David would eventually return to live with Andy in Yellow Springs until he graduated from high school. The 2 children also joined him in 1968 for a year in Geneva, Switzerland, when he was on sabbatical, teaching and concertizing all over Europe. It was also there that Andy received the news of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination over the radio and promptly sent off a telegram to Coretta Scott King, who had been a student of his while she attended Antioch. In fact, Coretta returned to Antioch for an award in the spring of 2004, after Andy's death in 2003, and stayed on through a Saturday night organ concert at the Presbyterian Church in Andy's memory. J. Ritter Werner, one of Dayton's outstanding organists, played a number of pieces by 2 of Andy's favorite composers. He also wrote a suite for organ for that occasion. It was a medley of 3 Negro spirituals and a camp meeting tune. You heard an excerpt at the very beginning of that medley, just before we came up here. The stories I gathered from friends like Andy's best friend, Erwin Abrams, and a host of others are more than I can possibly do justice to in limited time today. I cannot detail the Apple Butter Festival that Andy started and continued for 6 falls in Yellow Springs, nor the part he played in the Gegner barbershop boycott that we heard about with a panel yesterday. I cannot do justice to the enduring relationship he formed with Richard Price, his beloved partner of 25 years during those Washington years until Andy's death. There was a close relationship Andy had not just with music majors, but with all the students who took his music for the listener class or who were in the Antioch chorus. For that matter, the entire student body lined up regularly each quarter on the front steps of Main Building for a campus-wide photo taken by Murphy. Do you remember that? At which time, Andy would lead some spontaneous singing to keep people occupied as they waited for the picture taking to be finished. During this weekend, a number of you will doubtless call up your own memories of Andy stories to share with your friends. I cannot, in this limited time, begin to convey his importance to the music world that resulted in a number of prestigious awards given him both before his death and posthumously. I will tell you, however, that in 1978, he was recognized by the American Symphony Orchestra League as one of 50 people who, through his work and abilities, touched the lives of many orchestras in significant ways in the 20th century, unquote. His granddaughter, Madeline, daughter of Sandra, accepted another award from the American Symphony Orchestra League in 2004, the coveted Gold Baton Award that has also been given to Leonard Bernstein, John D. Rockefeller III, Beverly Sills, and Isaac Stern. It is the highest national award given for distinguished service to music and the arts, end quote. The Alumni of Color have created this award and are looking forward to this being the first of many significant annual awards for people who have established close relationships with faculty and or students. These relationships enhance their Antioch experience and had far-reaching impacts after graduation. Andy left a huge legacy, not just to Antioch, but to the world. It is fitting indeed that we acknowledge other Antiochians who have also left their mark in a memorable way, that we may continue to be inspired by the influence of this singular man.